Hello. Today I will be featuring the Prinz Eugen, and this commentary kind of works as a Hipper example as well, because the Hipper and Eugen are practically identical. The matchmaking is tier 10, which is of course less than optimal, because the Eugen and both the Hipper, they don't really tank that well. The reason why I say it works well for both, because the differences are very small between these two ships. They are honestly negligible differences between these two ships. And I'm playing on my American account, and you might notice the health pool looks a bit weird. And that's because I am running my German DD captain on the ship in this game. So it's not exactly an optimal build, so to say. I have health instead of fire chance. At least I have concealment expert, so that's good. But I don't know if I have priority target. Actually, I need to check. Do I have priority target? I do not. Someone just shot at me, and it didn't show up as me being targeted. So I have no priority target either. And I hope I at least have adrenaline rush on this captain. I'm not entirely certain. I think I might have last stand instead. So overall, not really a good captain for this ship, but we'll try to make it work anyway. In general, you want to have some sort of cover. This of course applies to all cruisers, and that's why this map isn't really the most comfortable one, especially since the Eugen isn't that good at tanking anything. Yes, they kind of buffed the bow armor fairly recently. They buffed it to 27mm, which means you can no longer be overmatched by 380mm guns, which is ships like the Bismarck and the Tirpitz and so forth. But considering I'm up against Yamatos and Alabamas and these kinds of things, not exactly that useful. I do, however, force the repair on this Alabama with my first volley, and I do get a permanent fire with the next one, so that's good. The fire chance per shell is pretty decent on this ship. I think you can, if you run, of course, the optimal captain with demolition expert and flags, you can reach like 15%. I have no DE here, so I think my fire chance is like 13. Since once again, this is the wrong captain for the ship. Well, not the wrong, but not an optimal captain by any means. I'm just using the premium to get some additional captain XP at this point. But, oh, he's still burning away happily. But as an HE spammer, it's okay. Well, no, it's not really that good, but usually in the early game you're kind of forced to take the role of an HE spammer. Unless someone happily sails past you and gives you a lot of broadside, you're going to be stuck spamming a lot of HE, because the AP doesn't really deal that well with long distances, unless of course we're talking full broadside, but any sort of small angling will reduce your damage significantly, so you're better off just spamming HE. Now the patch that increases your HE pen won't really change this much. You'll be pretty much playing exactly the same way. There's been a lot of hype about the increase in HE pen, but honestly the only difference is that you'll be getting more consistent penetrations. Actually, I think this is played on the patch, isn't it? Yeah, this is actually, yeah, I played this recently, so I'm pretty sure this is played on the recent patch. So I might even have the additional penetration here. I don't know, and honestly, I don't really care, because the difference it makes to the Eugen playstyle is minimal. You get slightly better HE penetration, but ultimately your HE deals so much less damage than your AP, and especially on the Eugen and both the Hipper, you're stuck with only 8 guns. So you want to use the AP when possible, but you're forced to use the HE a lot more than you want to, simply because, well, it's not very reliable because of the penetration angles and such forth, and like angling targets like this, there's no point shooting AP, especially against higher tier ships. So you're stuck using a lot of HE, and that's okay, and it'll be slightly better at it once the patch hits, or if this is the patch, I should probably check that out. Regardless, it doesn't impact your playstyle at all. Now, one of the key weaknesses of both the Eugen and the Hipper is the lack of DPM. You are quite big, you don't have the best concealment. Oh shit, this cube just slammed into me. I'm gonna slow down, let him get past me. He should have taken a bigger lead. I didn't even see him coming, he just rammed into me full speed. So I'm just gonna drop my speed and let him sail past me. Anyway, this playstyle of the ship won't really change, and I think that applies to pretty much all these high tier cruisers. People have been making a big deal out of this HE buff, but honestly, your HE alpha is so damn low on German cruisers that your AP is still your bread and butter. That's the ammo type you want to be using, but you're pretty much not possible. Well, I mean, you can still use purely AP, but it's so unreliable that you find yourself using HE all the time. And in fact, I recommend that when you're fighting any sort of angle targets, especially when you fight big health targets, especially in the Hipper and the Eugen, using HE is better because it takes you so long to do the equivalent damage of a single fire with AP because of this long reload that you're better off just using the HE. Now, enough talk about that. The Eugen and the Hipper, they both have the weakness of having pretty damn bad concealment for a tier 8. In fact, with Concealment Expert, the module, all these things, you can reach 11.5k in concealment, which is pretty damn garbage when you consider, for example, the Kutuzov, which even has a smoke, has 11.1. So the Russian cruiser that has a smoke has better stealth than you. So that kind of gives you an idea of just how terrible the concealment is. It's not very tanky, but it tends to eat a lot of penetration damage regardless of angling, and that is very frustrating. But it does have a pretty good health pool. 45k health, I think, is pretty much the same for both Hipper and Eugen. There's small variances there, but ultimately it is fairly healthy. But once again, the problem is, of course, that it eats a lot of pens, which makes it less optimal. This is one of those rare cases. This is in fact the first time I've gotten a good enough broadside that I consider worth switching to AP. I don't think the Donskoy is very fast, but I do get some hits on him. It looks like, is he starting to angle? I have to be careful here, there's an Alabama on the other side that I actually want to rush. And you can see the difference in damage as soon as I'm able to use the AP. That was a 7k volley without any sort of citadel. He starts angling though, so I'm forced to switch to HE because at this point, well, the penetration isn't enough to deal with any sort of angling. And that's okay, all the cruisers deal with this. The problem is that the rest of the cruisers don't have 13-second reloads, and if they do, they fire significantly more shells per volley or have a significantly better fire chance. Switch to the Yamato. He is actually in the position the Yamato is. I could easily use AP on him, but I already had HE loaded. The Donskoy is giving broadside again, so I switch back to AP. A bit too many targets shooting me right now, and you notice, of course, without priority target, I kind of have to guess which people are shooting at me and which aren't, and just bob and weave and hope I'm dodging it all. No citadel, unfortunately. I think I aimed a bit too high. But I've used my repair, trying to get out of spotting range so I don't get set on fire, because I can't really afford to eat a full fire damage at this point. The problem here is my team is getting quite crushed, and the position of my teammates is absolutely horrible. In fact, we have a Tirpitz on G1, we have a Rune on J2, like bottom left corner of the minimap if you look. The positioning on those guys is abysmal, and there's a Tirpitz that's hiding even further south than I am. In fact, only this Kiev and this Yamato are somewhat in a decent position, but they're gonna struggle. That was a pretty good hit on the Donskoy. That AP volley of course scared him off, and he's turning away. But I kind of wanted to harass this Yamato, because getting the kill on the Yamato would have been the most valuable thing here, since we could really use the points. We're falling behind on points since we have less ships alive and less capture points. How do you play this ship though? You want to be very conservative with your health pool. You might have noticed that I've been playing it very safe for a long time here, and that's kind of what you do. There's no shame in playing the early game very safely in the Eugen, because if you want to deal damage in the ship, you have to stay alive for a long time, because unless you get, of course, some sort of really lucky YOLO torp situation, but you should not count on that. You can't rely on that at all. And in general, playing very safe at long distance and just slowly grinding out damage is the best way to consistently deal damage in the ship. Until you get to later points like this, where you finally get those broadsides, These aren't going to become available early in the game, or well, if they are, then that guy's probably going to get killed by a lot of other people. But it's only later on when you get these situations where you get to shoot from surprising angles. For in this case, I'm unspotted because I'm using the island as cover, and I'm able to nail down a lot of damage on this Yamato. And here you really see the power, of course, of this German AP, the high alpha damage of this AP really shining through. Wow, okay, only 1 pen, 6 bounces. You see he angled just enough, and I think I shot a bit too far in the front, and suddenly that great damage value dropped off completely, and that's when it's time to switch to HE. Once again, 2 pens, 5 bounces. When you're getting this many bounces, that's when it's instantly time to switch back to HE. And the HE buff hasn't really changed this. The reason why I don't consider the HE buff to be that big of a deal, because the AP is still better, and you want to use the AP whenever possible, but when you're forced to use the HE, at least the HE will be slightly more comfortable now. That's pretty much all the buff will do. You're not suddenly going to be transforming a Eugen or a Hipper into an HE spammer, and that's not going to be happening to the Hindenburg or to the Rune either, because the difference between the AP and HE is so massive that there's no point switching over to HE spammers. If you want to play HE spammers, there are much better lines at that. For example, the IGN Cruiser line is fantastic at HE spamming. Hell, the Russian line is really good as well. Even the Moskva is a pretty fearsome one. And the French line now is one possible HE spammer as well. But you trying to force the German line into that just doesn't work that well. The buff is nice, of course, but I would have preferred better penetration angles on the German AP. But of course they're probably quite afraid of making the ship overpowered, because, well, if you do get broadsides and you are able to penetrate, the damage values you can pump out are pretty damn high. This Grosse Korfos will probably show us here. Yeah, what was that, 7.5k volley on a battleship. And oh, I think I am running Adrenaline Rush because my reload is 11 seconds now. Well, that's good. That makes life a lot easier. And that's 8.5k volley. Like, that's with a lot of overpens as well. You see, I only got 1 pen and 5 overpens. But because the alpha value is so high, even your overpens deal pretty damn good damage. Now though, the Yamato is still fleeing. At least the Kurfürst does go down, which is good. The problem is I'm down to 12.9k health, and I need to somehow carry this game, and that's quite difficult at this point. I'm trying to get undetected, since I want to get into B and maybe get close enough so that I can outplay the Eugen. At this range, outplaying an Eugen is very, very hard, considering he has almost 3 times my HP pool. So I need to land some huge AP broadside volleys or citadels or torps or anything. In fact, if I could trade evenly with that enemy Eugen, that would already be a good thing. Well, it would be a good play from me, considering how low I am on health. Sadly, my team, well, my Kiev is trying to do a good job. He's trying to kill the enemy DDs, which is admirable. But look at the Tirpitz. We have the Tirpitz on F9 who's chasing that Yamato. At this point, he should just give up on the Yamato. He's not going to kill an angled Yamato fleeing away like that. He should just give up on that chase and sail into B and help us with this fight in B. Because this is still winnable. The Yamato can run all he wants. This is still perfectly winnable if we win this fight here. And the Tirpitz is asking the Kiev to find him the Shimakaze. That's not an easy task, considering the concealment on the Shimakaze is far superior. Eugen, however, decides to rush me, which is problematic. I try to use AP, hoping he would give me some sort of broadside here, because really the only way I can outplay him at this point is if he gives some sort of broadside, but he remains angled. So that means AP is out of the question. I also have to worry about this Yamato shooting me from the right flank. Once again, I don't have priority target, which means, well, my right flank is pretty damn open at this point. While I'm shooting HE with my left flank, I drop some torps with the hopes of maybe catching this guy off guard, but it's possible he's also running Hydra. Oh, there comes the volleys from the Yamato as well, which I was afraid of. At this point, he has 31k health. I have 5,000. So I know at this point that there's no way I'm gonna be able to come out of this fight alive, because he has such a huge advantage. All he needs to do is just keep shooting me while angled. It doesn't matter if he does almost no damage. As long as he gets a couple of hits, I'm dead. So I launch one volley of torps force him to dodge, since I do predict he's running Hydra at this point. And I'm saving the last one. He's probably going to kill me now, but I want to trade because that's the best case scenario. That's basically a win for me with this health pool disadvantage. And I managed to land. I bait him into eating the very last torps, and I managed to trade even though he had 3 times my health. So that was a pretty good, ultimately a pretty good final play in this game, but it was not enough because, well, you saw what my team were doing. My battleships were completely out of position, so sadly this ended in a defeat and not a daily win. Still though, damage-wise, pretty good game for the Eugen considering tier 10 matchmaking, awkward captain, all of these things adding in. 164k is pretty nice, and credit-wise it is a premium of course, so it does pump out a nice amount of credits. Looking at team score, well, when a Prinz Eugen, or Prince Potato as I like to call this ship, outscores your tier 10 ships, then you know your team probably had some well, yes, these were apparently rank 1 players, both the Yamato and the Des Moines, but they didn't exactly impress me this game with their performance, sadly. Detail report wise, well, 16-minute game. Looking at the damage, even though I primarily shot HE, in fact I shot twice the amount of HE shells, 268 versus 136, and I also landed like a good, what, 40% more HE shells, actually more than that, still almost, damn, that's a lot more than that. Anyway, even though I landed 113 HE shells compared to the 71 with AP, I still did significantly more AP damage. The fires kinda helped compensate though, 26k fire damage, and that's of course the reason why you use HE, especially on very heavily high health pool targets. Jesus, English is hard apparently today. Jesus, I need to get some more coffee into me. Regardless though, the Eugen is in my opinion not in a very good position. I'll expand on this a bit later as I go over my recommended build for this ship. Right, I will be showing you the modules on my main account instead of on the account I just showed, because as I said, it's on my American account where I don't really have a dedicated Prinz Eugen captain, and I was honestly just getting my daily win, or well, attempting to get my daily win for my Z23 captain, aka German DD captain. So this is on my main account. Module wise, well, not much to talk about here. Consumables, premium repair followed by premium hydro, and then if you can afford it, premium catapult fighter as well. Now, if you do go defensive AA, the AA on the ship is actually quite good. For a full AA spec, it's actually really good at shooting down planes. But most of the time it's so very situational that Hydro is in general good. But if you find yourself queuing up with a carrier or facing a lot of carriers, then of course defensive AA is much better. And the AA power of both the Eugen and the Hipper should not be underestimated, because the values are surprisingly great. The DPS and so forth is very high. Upgrade wise, main armament mod 1. AA range, regardless of if you run Hydro or not, increasing the range is by far the most valuable perk here. Steering gears mod, because you don't want to be losing that rudder. Faster rudder shift and concealment, so you at least get the concealment to 13 without concealment expert. With concealment expert on top, let me show you the captain I of course use for this ship. And one of the good sides is of course that you can use your cruiser captain. It fits perfectly well. If you're leveling German cruisers and you happen to have a Eugen, then the cruiser captain fits very well for this. And as you can see, 11.5 detectability. Not that good, considering there are other ships that get much lower. Hell, I think even the Kutuzov gets 11.1, and that one has a smoke, so 11.5 isn't exactly impressive. But, I mean, it's better than being spotted across the map, because a lot of people enjoy shooting an Eugen. Captain perks wise, well, this is my Hindenburg captain that I quite enjoy, but to say you can see the same thing on the Eugen as on the Hindenburg. The turret traverse is so good on these ships that there's no need to run expert marksman. That's why I completely skip expert marksman. First of all, priority target, followed by adrenaline rush, followed by superintendent. Well, this isn't as in this is in general on higher tier German cruisers. In fact, on lower tier ones like the Hipper and the Eugen, I would probably get demolition expert first for the higher fire chance, followed by concealment expert. Once I have these, then you can start branching out into things like superintendent for additional heal if you use this captain on your German cruisers, as you probably should. And once we have superintendent, well, vigilance is nice when the hydro is on cooldown or when you're not running hydro. For example, on the Hindenburg, I almost never run hydro because of the cruise or because of the carrier threat that exists at tier 10. But if you don't consider it a real threat and you always run hydro, then of course vigilance isn't as valuable. Faster reload on damage control, because, well, this kind of applies to the Eugen as well as the Hindenburg. They have very high HP pools, which means fires which deal percentage damage can actually deal a lot of damage to you, so you want to be able to repair these without being punished too hard. And when you run high alert on top of running the flag, which include, what's it called? Let me see. Let me find my flag. Oh, why is this UI so slow? It's called November Foxtrot. Yes, when you run both of these at the same time, you can actually get your repair down to a 51-second cooldown, which is pretty damn fast. And this is of course the same thing for the Hindenburg, which is why I like running this type of build. But I've already made a commentary on this build and why I enjoy it. And finally, the last point I put into preventive maintenance, so you don't lose turrets or torpedoes, both which are extremely important both to the Hindenburg and to the Eugen. So once again, good synergy between using the captains here. Regardless, the Eugen and the Hipper are both ships that I consider in need of some buffs. The biggest issue is really the lack of firepower they have. I mean, 13-second reload on these guns is such a long time to wait, considering you only have 8 guns. And especially when you compare it to some of the firepower heavy cruisers like the Kutuzov, I mean, 8-second reload on 12 guns. Yes, they're lower caliber, but IFHE more than enough compensates for it, and even Chapayev is a very good example of more damage and so forth. What the Eugen or the Hipper both lack is sheer DPM, and the AP doesn't really compensate for it because it requires broadsides to be able to be efficient. And honestly, I would love to see this reload cut to maybe 11 seconds or maybe even 10 seconds. Kind of like give them the treatment that they gave to the New Orleans and the Baltimore, where they increased or reduced the reload significantly to make it more competitive. The Eugen and the Hipper could both use this treatment, but as it is now, you just kind of have to deal with it. And well, if you get past the Hipper, then you get the Rune, which is an excellent cruiser. Anyway, that was my Eugen/Hipper commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it.